Oh, drat these computers. They're so naughty and so complex. I could pinch them.
What's up, everyone, and welcome. In this episode, we are going to talk about the Stop, aka Djvu Ransomware family. Stop Ransomware is a family with over 300 members that expands almost on a weekly basis and counts as one of the most widespread ransomware families out there. Stop has up to 200 variants, using a command control server for encryption key generation when internet access is present, and using a local key encryption if no internet is available. Targeting mostly simple consumer users, this ransomware can be a perfect example of a classic ransomware. I'm not sure if you've heard of Stop in the past. Probably not. Few write about it. Most researchers don't cover it, and for the most part, it targets consumers through cracked software, adware bundles, and other shady sites, so a lot of victims aren't really trying to come public. We do hear about the ones that make headlines: Revel, Ryuk, Babuk. Those affect infrastructure, government agencies, and have a kind of sexy or dirty sexy story for the news companies to, put the blame on other countries or whatnot, and keep you sort of interested in the stories. This story is fascinating to me. It involves the usage of an extremely cunning name, which seems to have taken over the life of a legitimate computer file format, the DJVU format, which is an open source competitor to the PDF format. It involves fake decryptors that were disseminated to desperate people, which actually double encrypted their system. Djvu has tons of different variants that confuse some researchers even to how many there are, and is this one or that one even part of the Stop family. There are so many variants that, depending on which resource you look up, Bleepy Computer versus MCSoft, you find numbers ranging from 36 variants up to 300. I'm actually stunned at how little there is in terms of research for ransomware that has regularly topped the list of number of infections globally since 2018. I expected to drown in so much research, so that this video could have been one of those 9-hour explainer videos. Become a zero to hero in the Stop Ransomware, only 9 hours. But alas, 70-80% of all the research I found was actually how to get rid of different variants that a decryptor key was available, which I guess is a good thing. And then finally, I have to say that this ransomware group has a diabolically ingenious target group. People who want to download cracked software and keygens and all of that, those people don't want to make themselves public, so they pay. As always, here's the list. Some of the resources I used to create this episode. More than welcome to check it out yourself, or just sit back and watch. So who is Stop, or what is Stop? Stop is a ransomware, thank you, that runs on Microsoft Windows. Who would have never guessed? The ransomware first made its appearance in December 2017. The malware uses the Crypto++ implementation and encrypts user data using AES-256, or later version SALSA 20, and it adds a certain file extension. New versions are created almost every month, and it's known to append the following extensions. This is just a very short list: SAVEfiles, puma, pumas, pumax, shadow, keypass, Djvu, and many other extensions. This campaign has been very successful, with ID Ransomware reporting numerous victims submitting files to their system on a daily basis. In the second quarter of 2021, MCSoft's ransomware report showed the Djvu variant of Stop ransomware commanding 70% of the entire reported infection landscape. Each victim is asked to pay $300 to $600 for the data decryptor by the ransomware gang.
Say, pardon me, but could you help out a fellow American who's down on his luck?
Hit the road!
Stop, along with its variants, is hands down the most spread ransomware on the market. To give you some more perspective, the ransomware identification service, ID Ransomware, gets approximately 2,500 ransomware submissions a day. Of those, 60 to 70% are Stop ransomware submissions. So you can see how successful this has been. In order to distribute Stop, the ransomware developers teamed up with shady websites and adware bundles. These sites promoted fake software cracks or free programs, which are really adware bundles that install a variety of unwanted software and malware onto a user's computer. One of the programs installed via these bundles was Stop Ransomware. Some of the reported cracks that had been seen installing Stop include KMS Pico, Cubase, Photoshop, and Antivirus software. It is not only cracks though, as many of these shady sites offer downloads of other free software, but they're just simply adware bundles that install the ransomware along with whatever that free software was. Even worse, some of these variants also bundled the Azerult password stealing Trojan with the ransomware for a double attack on the victim. What makes it so much of a pain is the sheer amount of variants that keep being released. In fact, right now there are estimates of almost 300 variants that are known about. A researcher named Gillespie had some success in the past helping victims recover their files through his decryption tool, Stop Decryptor, that included offline decryption keys that the ransomware used when it couldn't communicate with its command control server. The ransomware researcher had also limited success in helping those who were infected with unique keys, so when a machine could contact its command control server. This was an arduous task, though, with the ransomware pumping out sometimes 3 to 4 variants a day and thousands of victims needing help. It just blew out of proportion and was difficult to handle. Unfortunately, decryption has changed, and Gillespie was no longer able to offer as much support as he was previously able to. Now we go into keypass. As with many current ransomware groups, we must really start the story in the past. We continue our journey in early 2018 with a ransomware that came out called keypass. Between August 8th and August 10th, 2018, within 36 hours, a new ransomware called keypass showed up in over 20 countries. That's how extremely successful and fast it spread in 2018. The victims downloaded a seemingly harmless installer. Again, KMS Micro, Pico, Photoshop, etc. They installed the malware on their computer. Trojan itself was written in C++ and compiled in MS Visual Studio. It was developed using the libraries MFC, Boost, and Crypto++. The PE header contained a recent compilation date. keypass was undiscerning in its choice of hostage files, which means it didn't care what it was encrypted. It encrypted everything within limits. Didn't encrypt, your browser, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to get online. Many ransomware species hunt documents with specific extensions, .doc or PDF or PNG or JPEG, but this one bypassed only a few folders. All of the content on the computer was transformed into gobbledygook with the extension .keypass. Now, it didn't actually encrypt the files in their entirety. It just took the first 5 megabytes of each, but that's, of course, little consolation to a victim who cannot access the files. So, how did the ransomware work? Back then in, say, the Stone Age of ransomware in 2018? Let's check it out. The attack starts with infecting an install package, which you are intended to download. These are propagated via cracked password and keygen websites. So let's say you download said installer or keygen or crack. Once you download and install it, what you believe is a legitimate installer, the Trojan copies its executable file to the local app data folder and launches it. It then deletes itself from the original location. Soon after the launch of this executable, keypass connects to its command and control server and receives the encryption key and the infection ID of the current victim. The data is transferred over plain HTTP in the form of JSON. Here we see the call to the remote command control server to retrieve the encryption key and the victim ID. Now, what if there is no internet? If the command control server is inaccessible, in other words, if the infected machine is not connected to the internet anymore, you pulled out the, you disconnected Wi-Fi and you pulled out the RJ45 thinking maybe that can help. Or if the command control server itself is down, the Trojan uses a hard-coded key and ID, which means that in the case of the offline encryption, the decryption of the victim's files is pretty trivial. So the developers of this Trojan implemented a very simplistic scheme. The malware uses the symmetric algorithm AES-256 in CFB mode with 0.4 and the same 32-bit key for all files. The Trojan encrypts, as I mentioned before, a maximum of 5 megabytes at the beginning of each file. So, following the receipt of the determination whether it's going to use the command control server provided keys or the local ones, it spawns several copies of its own processes passing the encryption key and the victim ID as command line arguments. Here you see in the screenshot where the two values or variables are sent. This could potentially be the encryption key, and this is the victim ID. followed by the enumeration of drives. So keypass then enumerates local drives and network shares accessible from the infected machine and searches for all files regardless of their extension. Followed by that, every file is encrypted and is given an additional extension, keypass, and the ransom notes are placed in every process directory. Now here are this is a sample of some of the skipped directories. For example, the Mozilla or Google or Internet Explorer. Makes no sense to encrypt the browser because then the victim has no access really to get to the internet from the machine for an easy way of potentially paying. So we move on to Djvu. Djvu was first identified in December 2018. In addition to attacks in the United States, most of its victims are from Europe, Asia, South America, and Africa. The Djvu malware uses advanced encryption standard or Rsa Cryptography algorithms for encrypting files in the victim machine. Djvu was much more complex than the original keypass in that it relied on multiple exe files, it disabled Windows Bitdefender and various functions, it updated host files so victims are unable to reach numerous security websites. It shows a Windows update screen as a smoke screen so that you don't think anything's happening if your system doesn't start spinning up the fan. Now Djvu has been so successful that it even triggered piggyback attacks. A ransomware named Zorab was impersonating Stop Djvu ransomware and being distributed as a decryptor for the Stop Djvu family. The decryptor promised free decryption from Djvu, but instead infected the victims with another ransomware, the crab.exe, making things much worse. Now, let's see how the Djvu variant differs, or has evolved, from the keypass variant. Here we have the flow I showed you earlier that showed how the keypass variant was installed on a system. I'm going to overlay where the changes are and if there are any structural changes, which, spoiler alert, there have been none that are really evident. But we do know that the spreading tactics now include phishing emails or spam emails, exploits, and other backdoors. So the ransomware gang has spread and increased their target market by the use of spam email. So they're no longer just packaging it in crack keygen files on shady websites. They're also sending it out via spam emails or phishing emails. They are relying, in certain instances, on exploits of systems or software to get in and drop their payload. And they're using other backdoors. In terms of other backdoors, I'm assuming that they're talking about other rootkits this is being bundled into other exploits other attacks. So you have that double encryption kind of scenario. Now, in terms of the files itself and how they execute, within keypass, they were using one exe file that was essentially doing everything, including communicating with the command control server. They have now evolved to using 4 separate files. So the initial exe file that's downloaded, which is randomcharacters.temp.exe, and what's moved into the local app data folder, the job of that application is to download 4 files, the first one being 1.exe, followed by 2.exe. What comes next? 3.exe. What comes after that? Update win.exe. Okay. When executed, the 1.exe will execute various commands that remove the definitions for Windows Defender and disable various functionality. This executable will also execute a PowerShell script called script.ps1, which disabled Windows Defender's real-time monitoring using the command setmppreference, disable real-time monitoring, set it to true. Now, after that, 2.exe will add numerous security websites, the URLs for security websites, and the URLs for different download sites, which could potentially help somebody clean their system. Well, these are added to the system's host file so that the victims can't actually reach those. So they put in like dummy IP addresses or put a loopback so that if I call up, let's say, support.windows or support.microsoft.com, my system is looking in my host files and saying, do I have a connection? Do I know where that is? And it's a loopback to your own system, so you can't get to that actual site. You can't get to the legitimate Microsoft site. So in step 3, they begin with their encryption process. So the files get encrypted on your system, and on top of that, it calls this update win.exe. And now the purpose of update win.exe is only to really kind of keep you occupied, to make you think like everything's okay. It's not really, it's just showing you a screen that says, you know, we're currently doing a Windows update. So in the event that you're like, well, why did my computer fan all of a sudden come on? Because there's so many resources being used, or, you know, so much data being transferred. You would look at, you try to piece together yourself, okay, it's Windows Update that's, you know, taking all these resources, when in fact it is the encryption of your files that's taking place. So they're now relying on 4 separate modularized, so they become more modular in terms of the tasks that are performed on your machine. And we know that Djvu has installed, or is now relying on the Rsa Cryptography algorithm. It encrypts only 150 kilobytes of data. It adds also 334 random bytes plus encryption key and the victim ID and FileMaker to the file size during the encryption process. So if you remember, keypass encrypted the first 5 megabytes. Now that the Djvu has realized, or has come to the realization, that you only need to encrypt the first 150 kilobytes in order to make a file unusable. And then they add on the encryption key, the victim ID, FileMaker to the actual file size. And then it's known that they have installed Azerult, and Azerult is a password-stealing Trojan. So if you pay the ransom, or if you get a decryption key from any of the sources that can help you with the offline versions, etc., if you happen to decrypt all of your code, chances are you have a Trojan sitting on your system that's stealing data and stealing important information from you and sending it off to hackers. So finally, after all of this is done and the encryption is done, they are now showing you, instead of having the README files just dumped into a directory, they are showing you on screen a notification with sort of the ransom note saying, don't worry, stuff is encrypted, you can get it back, but you have to follow these instructions, blah, blah, blah. Now, as of July 28th, 2021, the newest variant was the MOOC strain. So again, they're still working, they're still iterating, they're still using this same structure with modifications where, for them, given, you know, the improvements in the security industry, it makes sense. You know, they're disabling Windows Defender before they start doing this, so it's not recognized as a you know, a Trojan or a virus. They're updating your host files to impede your ability to get help online. They are showing you a Windows update screen to kind of throw you off base, so that during the process of encryption, you don't just yank out the plug or just, you know, completely shut the system down before it's finished. This is to kind of make you feel at ease, like, oh, it's just a Windows update, and then within a period of time, all of a sudden you see your ransom note. So, how do you stay safe? Now, I could go through my usual list of all of the general things that I say, mostly for corporations, but it also does relate to individual or consumers. But this is a special case. This is really only going after consumers currently. So I'm going to look at specific steps you could take for this type of attack. Now, number one is obvious. Don't download or install cracked software. What are you thinking? If you're a company and or an employee of a company and you're installing cracked software on work computers and servers, then God help you on many levels. If you're a consumer and you're saying, oh, well, this is $150 and I can't really afford it, well, just think about what could happen. If you download a cracked software like, you know, the KPMS, Pico, the Photoshop, or some other software which you think is just exorbitantly expensive, in the end, you could be losing pictures of your family, your tax documents, extremely important information that sits on your computer. So it's just not worth it. Number two, we're talking about phishing. Be alert. Email is not the fourth task in your multitasking repertoire. Let's be honest. Humans suck at multitasking. Few human brains have yet mutated to be omnipresent, except me, of course. So you can't multitask. All you're doing is sort of overheating your brain, jumping between one task and another. You're not doing them both at the same time. You're just jumping between one another very, very quickly. So mistakes happen. Shortcuts are taken, like not reading who the from is. And boom, you're the victim. So when you check email, check the from, double check the email address it's coming from. If it's a Gmail account and it's claiming to be PayPal, then you should know right away PayPal would never send an email through a Gmail account. They're a billion-dollar corporation, have their own mail domain. Same thing goes for eBay, same thing for Chase Bank, or whatever institutions you belong to. Make sure you check the from that it's a legitimate email domain at least. You want to check the signature or any other company-related elements like logos to make sure it matches your expectations, and you also want to check spelling and grammar. Every email you get is vying for your attention, so they all seem familiar and they all seem important. Did I sign up for that? I don't know. I didn't send any money. Like, if you're thinking that kind of stuff, like, why am I getting this email? Then delete it, or you have to investigate deeper and see what it really is or who it's really from before you do anything. Links in emails. Don't just click links in emails. Emails are there to accomplish communication, but it doesn't mean it needs to be the simplest and the shortest path. Just because there's a link in the email doesn't mean, or a link from your bank, doesn't mean you need to click on it. First, refer to the recommendations above, which is about phishing, be alert, and then check the email link. Some mail clients, when you hover over the link, actually give you a preview of where it's going. Check the domain. Check what's inside of it. Where are they trying to take you? Does it look like chase.com or ebay.com, or does it look like x blah blah z blah 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 dot ebay.psych.nl or Netherlands or whatever? It's far safer to actually save the websites you visit frequently as a bookmark. So you go to the legitimate domain, you save it in your bookmarks, and when you get a message or an email or text message or whatever, you go to that bookmark, because then you know that the connection is exactly, or the landing point is exactly what you're expecting. Next up, email attachments. Don't just download and open them. Hopefully you have a good antivirus that also scans your email. But if you receive an attachment in the mail, it does not matter how important the email says it is, or that you have to answer to this blah 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 by blah blah blah, unauthenticated use of your account, or this, that, and the other. Take a deep breath, check who the email's from, look at the spelling and the grammar, and then only download the file if you trust who it is from. Is the email address that the email is coming from legit, or is it a Gmail account or some, Uzbekistan mail provider? All of these are red flags you should be checking. You can receive all types of attachments, from PDFs to Word documents to Excel spreadsheets, exe files claiming to be important patches for your machine. No software company is going to send patches via email unless you fight tooth and nail and tell them, that's the only way I'm going to accept it from you. This is some blah, blah. They're still probably going to say, go to our support center. There's the download. It has a specific CVE. There's a link to the patch, blah, blah. You can download it that way. They're not sending it via email. It's just not happening. Next up, antivirus. Get a good antivirus. I already said, if you have one, hopefully it's good enough and it scans your emails, but get a good antivirus and or anti-malware. You want it to scan your system as best as possible. Now, yes, they probably will most likely fail when it comes to a 0-day attack, but it's better to catch 80 to 90% of attacks, of known attacks, than to not even try to catch anything, just sit there open. Back up your system. Backup. Keep a second backup on a system that you turn off and only turn on periodically to make backups of the new changes. Terabyte, single disk backups are super cheap. If you were to do this process and your system were to be infected or encrypted, then you could just dump everything. You always install Windows again, or Linux or Mac, or whatever system you're infected with, or your system you have that's infected. You could just reinstall the operating system, and all of your treasure trove of data, the pictures of your grandkids, the pictures of your kids, the pictures of your parents, the pictures of your vacation, again, your tax documents, work files, anything that you have that you cherish and you know that if you lose it, you're screwed, should be on a secondary or even third backup that is completely offline for 90 to 95% of the time. Turn it off. If it's on and it's connected to your system during the encryption process, that data will also be encrypted. Finally, your router. Now, a lot of corporations don't necessarily have the router. They'll either have a firewall in the front, with a bunch of switches behind it. So again, this is really to your home office, your system. If you're working from home because of the entire COVID situation, ongoing COVID situation, then this pertains to you. Log into your router and harden the firewall. Access your router and look for the firewall settings. Some routers actually give you a ton of flexibility to block incoming and outgoing connections. In some cases, you can block incoming traffic from entire countries. Now, I know that some disgruntled person or disgruntled hacker that was an affiliate of the Conti ransomware gang just put out IP addresses. He said he didn't get paid enough, so he started dumping data and information to help authorities and the security industry basically try to track down who Conti is and how their systems work or how their network works. And they were able to take IP addresses. You could take those IP addresses, add them to your router security, blocking incoming traffic from them so that they just can't get into your system from those IP addresses. Of course, they can mask it with other VPNs and this, that, and the other thing, but you're making it more difficult for them. They're looking for the lower hanging fruit. They're not looking to fight to get into your system. They're looking for easy ways to get into your system. So there you have it. With that, I say thanks for watching, and don't forget to share, don't forget to subscribe, and smash the bell, and don't forget to just breathe. Okay guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.